Hi, here's the Outlaw Bookseller again. It's really hot. It's really uncomfortable. It's really unpleasant. The kids are supposed to be back in school today. Most of them are not. So in typical grumpy old man mode, here I am. And you ask yourself, why am I wearing a tie? Well, this just isn't any old tie. This is John Wyndham's tie. No, seriously, this tie belonged to John Wyndham. I'm going to take it off because it's way too warm, but I'll give you a close-up of the graphic design. It's a really nice silky tie, actually. It's a very 60s sort of thing. That's it. This is John Wyndham's tie, and this was given to me around about 8 or 9 years ago by one of John's nieces, a lady called Sheila, who I met one day in work when I was selling books, and she and her husband were looking at the works of John Wyndham, and being a lifelong John Wyndham fan, I was straight in there and started to talk, and she soon revealed that she was related to the great man, the English master of the disaster novel, and it was really exciting to talk to her about John, and we got to know each other, and she came to a couple of events I ran in the bookshop, one with Christopher Priest, and Chris was really interested to talk to her, and she told me many anecdotes about her memories of John in the early 60s when she was a child. And she gave me that tie, and I was invited around to her house and look at her collection of Wyndham artifacts, which was really a real privilege. So I thought I'd talk about John Wyndham a bit today, because in recent years there's been a resurgence of interest from publishers in terms of reissuing his more obscure works. I actually wrote to the British Library a few years ago suggesting they try and find a copy of his first novel, which is a crime novel published by Noons, which I don't think was ever issued in paperback, only ever had one hardcover run. Very, very rare book. I've never seen one. And it's really, really super rare. And I don't think they could find it, but I have a distinct impression that that prompted them to look at starting their science fiction line. I may just be, suffering from delusions of grandeur, but it happened about a year after that. So who knows, maybe I kicked it off. So I just wanted to sort of pull down some old Wyndhams here and look at some of the more obscure works. These are mostly A format paperbacks that I bought way, way back in the day, back in the late 70s, early 80s, some of them the early 70s. This is a Sphere. There was a Best of John Wyndham, 2 volumes that they did. I do believe I might have get the right way around. I think I might have actually got these second hand. I can't recall. So I don't remember seeing them at the time as I bought my other ones. And of course, Wyndham had a relatively long career. He started writing and publishing in the 30s. He died quite young in 1966. And of course, he wrote under different names. Now, his full name was John Wyndham Lucas Parks Bain and Harris. Some sources say John Wyndham Parks Lewis Bain and Harris, and he wrote under the name John Bain and maybe John Harris. I'm not so certain about that, but he had this huge, enormously long name, and he wrote for many magazines. He wrote American-style stories before coming across his classic English short story style, which he began using the day of the Triffids. So just to look over some of his more obscure books, some of which are out of print, some which have been reissued recently. I'm referring back to my old Wyndham collection, and this is The Secret People, which has been reissued by Penguin in B format in the last couple of years. And it had been out of print since this edition went out. This is a Coronet edition, and this went out of print in the mid-80s. And I bought this, I think it would have been the late 70s. I remember one day in the late 70s. This was 78, so I was 15 or nearly 15. I think it was just after Christmas, and I'd had a book token for £15. And with a £15 book token in 1978, you could go mad. And at the time I was buying loads of punk rock records because that was the exciting thing. And I wasn't buying so many books, but I was reading and rereading a lot. So I went into my local John Menzies in Pontypridd and I picked up The Secret People, which was his first novel. I haven't read it for many, many years. Underground Cities, very sort of Edgar Rice Burroughs type thing, exploration. So I must reread that at some point. At the same time, I picked up Exiles on Aspers, which is a collection of novellas. And the title story in this is really reminiscent of Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End. It's about man adapting to living with alien creatures, and the alien creatures look rather like devils. And this was written a good while before Childhood's End. And it's always been one of my favourite Wyndham shorts. And just to take a quick look inside at the other, yeah, there's three novellas. Exiles, I can't remember the other two at all. It's been such a long time. One's called No Place Like Earth, the other called The Venus Adventure. But this is a great story, Exiles and Aspers. I really recommend that as my favourite very early Wyndham story. Wyndham then actually did a couple of books set on Mars, and the first one, I'm going to put the paperback back because I haven't got it. I just realised I used to have a paperback of this, and I obviously let it go for space reasons. And this is a 7-house hardcover from the 80s of John Wyndham's Stowaway to Mars, which has a female protagonist, which is interesting. This is the 1930s, and this is a full-length novel. It's very of its time, but it's a great little read. This hasn't been reissued yet. Or yes, it has been reissued yet. This has been reissued by Penguin. Again, the first time since this 80s edition. Great little book. Do pick it up if you can. And there's a sequel to it called Sleepers of Mars, and this is a coronet one with a really beautiful cover there. I do love that cover design. And the sequel was a novella, I believe. Let's have a look. It's a short story about 50 pages long, and it's got other short stories in there as well. And that is yet to be reissued. As you can see, the spine is faded, but the front is still in good nick. I've really cherished that over the years. So hopefully that'll get reissued at some point. Another Wyndham collection from back in those days. Again, looking at the date in this, it says 79, so perhaps reissued a year later. Wanderers of Time, and this has got some great stories in it as well. Includes a story called The Puffball Menace, which was like a dry run for Day the Triffids, and about puffballs. You know what a puffball is? It's a fungus, some kind of mushroom that rolls around, not on its own, of course, and releases spores. They sort of go puff and infect everything. So 75p, great stuff. One of my favourite Wyndham collections was this one from NEL. Those others are all from Coronet, which along with NEL, New English Library, were part of the Hodder and Stone publishing stable. And this is Jizzle, with a great cover there. And this is unusual. This is some of his more whimsical stories, and some of them are more sort of horror based. And there's some crackers in here. Heaven Sent, which is about a girl in love with her boss at a perfume business, and I really like that story. And she manages to invent a perfume to make him fall in love with her, and it's the sort of thing that would be in a women's magazine. It's really charming. And there's some other crackers in there. The Wheel, which is a great post-apocalypse story about how taboo the wheel will be in the future after the bomb, because of course you create machines and they destroy the world. Haven't read it for years, but it's still in my head. And that's a bit of a dry run for the Chrysalids. It depicts that sort of society where there are taboos because of the world being destroyed by nuclear weapons. So again, this is very long out of print. And I think it had different covers over the years. I'm not sure how easy to get now. I get the feeling they're quite hard to get, these. But they're all worth looking out for. And Wyndham, to me, you know, was somebody I've read as a child. This was the first John Wyndham book I bought, and it's Day the Triffids. I'll just have a look at the date, and it's in a total state. I mean, I've read this book, and it's got all sorts of, I've written all sorts of crap in there when I was a kid. And I'll just take a look at the date now. And this was, let's see, good grief, I can't even read this, 1973. So I was 10 when I bought this. I was 10 in mid-73. And it was, I believe, my first Wyndham, and I read it, and I've got a whole little collection here, all in the same livery from those days, and they've all seen some action over the years. The Penguins, they're great stuff, and I think most of these are in print these days. They're all the classic obvious ones. Recently, one of the more obscure ones from this is The Outward Urge, which has been done by British Library. This has been out of print for really long time, since the early 80s. And as you see, it's credited to John Wyndham and Lucas Parks. And the story then was that Lucas Parks was his technical collaborator on this collection of novellas about a space-going family. And of course, he was Lucas Parks. There wasn't a Lucas Parks. He wasn't a technical collaborator. So, but he put that in to make it sort of look more authentic, really. And this copy I bought in '77, and it's 5 novellas, and it was first published, I believe, in the early 60s, 1950. Well, chapters 1 to 4 first published by Michael Joseph, and chapter 5 was added for the Science Fiction Book Club edition in '61. And it has to be said, it was pretty dated even then. It's very Arthur C. Clarke sort of thing. I don't use the word dated, as of its time, but he was actually pretty behind its time, I would say, at that point, really. But it's just been reissued. I don't have a copy of the new edition. I'll try and get one to show you at some point. And that's been reissued in British Library, or maybe even Gollancz Masterworks Golden Age, possibly. It's one of those two. I've got a feeling it's the Gollancz thing. I was completely wrong. The Golden Age ended in about 1950, so there you go, typical. So watch out for that if you can. It's a nice little curio to have. Anybody under a certain age won't have it. And still out of print is Wyndham's, what was pretty much Wyndham's final novel, which was Web, which has always had a real critical drubbing, and it's actually really, really good. And basically, this is the first edition paperback from Penguin, published in 1980. And I didn't buy hardcovers then, I couldn't afford them, you didn't see them so much. And this was in print till the mid-80s, and then it sort of fell out of print. And everybody said it was crap. It's actually really good. And it's classic Wyndham, a utopian society decides to set up on a Pacific atoll. Unfortunately, some decades earlier, there was a nuclear bomb test there, which has caused the spiders there to mutate. And I've read this a few times, and it's really, really good. It's got the feel of Ballard. It's got the Ballardian feel of the Terminal Beach. And I'm sure he wrote this after reading things like Ballard stories like the Terminal Beach, and the way that old J.G. invoked the power of the bomb. And there are wonderful scenes with the Polynesian natives on the island who are part of a spider cult. It's really, really bleak. And like all of Wyndham's best works, it's about survival and social Darwinism and evolution and the survival of the fittest and all that sort of Darwinian stuff. And it's a great book, and it really does need a reissue. So if you see a copy, pick it up. Don't believe what the critics say. It's actually much, much better. And I think it did fall in with the new wave of the time. It was actually rejected by his publisher, by Michael Joseph, when he submitted it. And it didn't come out till, over 10 years after his death, which is shocking. And great book. Well overdue for reissue and overdue for critical reappraisal. So there you go. That's John Wyndham's Tie. That's some of the more obscure John Wyndham titles that I've got in the collection, and you should look out for. Hopefully they'll get reissued soon if they haven't been. And just as a little treat, because I pulled out my Masterworks edition of Day of the Triffids for a recent Dune video, this is the original Masterworks hardcover of Day of the Triffids, and this is number 10. It's got an X on it, and beautiful jacket there. You can see the satellite weapons exploding in the sky and blinding everybody who's watching them, and the Triffids waiting to take over the Earth beneath the green flashes, which of course in the book everybody thinks a meteorite strikes, but they're not. If you read the book closely, you'll see that it's satellite weapons, it's SDI, it's Star Wars weapons, and this is the early 50s. I mean, genetic engineering and satellite weapons. Wyndham, absolute genius, brilliant. Love this book. Not my favourite. My favourite is The Midwich Cuckoos. We'll talk about that again. So there's a few John Wyndham rarities for you. I'll give you one more glimpse of the great man's tie. This is not for sale, by the way. Look at that. They don't make them anymore. It feels real lovely and silky. And Outlaw Bookseller signing off for now. And remember, please don't call it sci-fi. Always call it SF.